7 a.m. As usual, I was preparing breakfast for 3. On the table were an organic vegetable salad, whole wheat toast, and a protein smoothie that my husband Thomas favored. Everything had to be perfect. That was the unspoken rule of the Anderson household. I'm Linda Anderson, 34 years old. I used to work as an accountant at a major corporation, but now I'm a full-time housewife managing this spacious 6-bedroom house. We live in an upscale neighborhood in Greenwich, Connecticut. The nameplate, Anderson, gleams in gold letters, and seasonal flowers bloom in our garden, tended by a gardener who comes twice a week. We moved here 5 years ago when Thomas got promoted. We settled in this quiet Greenwich neighborhood. The spacious living room with its substantial fireplace, antique furniture, and marble kitchen counters, everything exudes an elegance befitting an upper-class home. Good morning, Mom. My daughter Megan came down the stairs in her usual pristine uniform. With a composure unusual for a 15-year-old, she maintained straight A's. She's the perfect example of what my husband constantly refers to as Ivy League material. She even serves as vice president of the math club at Greenwich High School. But lately, something's been off. Megan, are you feeling all right? Her cheeks were sunken, with dark circles under her eyes. For the past 2 months, she's been complaining more frequently about headaches and insomnia. Her appetite has decreased too. As a mother, I couldn't ignore these changes. Even her morning oatmeal, which she used to finish without fail, now remains half-eaten. I'm fine, Mom. Just a little tired. Megan smiled, but her smile seemed strained. Good morning. My husband Thomas appeared. A Princeton graduate, he now earns over $300,000 annually as a senior executive at an IT company. His perfectly pressed expensive suit and impeccable appearance reflect his meticulous personality. It's a 40-minute drive to Manhattan. Every morning, he commutes in his black BMW 7 Series, a sight that commands respect in our neighborhood. Megan, did you finish last night's assignments? Yes, Dad. All done. Good girl. Thomas nodded with satisfaction. His educational policy is strict. Megan's future lies on a predetermined track. Maintain top grades in high school and advance to an Ivy League school. No other options are considered. Every weekend, he makes her take SAT practice tests and frowns when her scores don't improve. I silently watched their exchange. In this house, emotional expression is restrained, and conversations are always conducted with proper etiquette. That's the Anderson way. But sometimes, I shrink from my husband's domineering attitude. After all, his eyes seeking perfection are directed at me too. You're going to hear about the school health examination results today, right? Thomas said, putting down his coffee cup. Even the sound of dishes touching must be refined in this house. Yes. I have an appointment with Dr. Morrison. Dr. Sarah Morrison is the designated physician at Megan's high school, a veteran pediatrician with over 20 years of experience. Known for her gentle demeanor but firm attitude when necessary, her clinic is trusted by upper-class families in the area. The blood test results should be in. I hope everything's normal. I nodded slightly at Thomas's words, praying that Megan's poor health was just due to fatigue. Lately, I've been hearing noises from her room in the middle of the night. Is she staying up late at her desk? Though I want to check on her, I've been leaving her be. On the surface, we might look like an ideal upper-class family. But recently, I've had this anxiety that something is slowly crumbling beneath this perfect daily life. Perhaps it was a mother's intuition. Looking at the morning sun streaming through the kitchen window, I let out a deep sigh. In the white-themed waiting room, the scent of disinfectant lingered. At Dr. Morrison's private clinic, I sat alone, waiting for the results. Watching tropical fish swim leisurely in the reception area's tank, I recalled the morning's events. Megan had no appetite again this morning, barely touching her oatmeal before heading to school. I just received word from her teacher that she's having trouble concentrating in class lately. It must be anemia. I muttered to myself reassuringly. But was that really all? A mother's sixth sense suggested something else. Sitting in the waiting room chair, I unconsciously gripped my handbag handle tightly. "Mrs. Anderson, thank you for waiting." A nurse in a white coat appeared and called my name. As I tried to stand, my legs trembled slightly. Despite being familiar with this doctor, I felt strangely nervous today. "This way, please." I was led not to the usual examination room, but to the director's office at the back of the clinic. Behind the heavy wooden door, Dr. Morrison sat. Her usually warm smile was oddly rigid today. "Mrs. Anderson, please have a seat." The doctor pointed to the chair in front of her desk. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the window made her white coat appear even whiter. On the examination desk were documents that appeared to be Megan's test results. "You've been concerned about Megan's behavior, haven't you?" "Yes. She has no appetite lately, and it seems she's not sleeping well." As I tried to continue, Dr. Morrison's expression became even more serious. The air suddenly grew heavy. She took a deep breath, then began speaking quietly. "Mrs. Anderson, there's something you need to know about your husband." At those words, my thoughts momentarily froze. My husband. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Dr. Morrison looked down at the documents on her desk and continued, carefully choosing her words. "Your daughter's blood tests showed traces of illegal drugs." My mind went blank. I wanted to believe I'd heard wrong. Drugs. There must be some mistake. I could feel the blood draining from my face. My hands began to shake. I gripped my skirt tightly to hide it. Adderall and modafinil. These are drugs that cannot be obtained without a prescription. Dr. Morrison carefully spread out the test result documents while continuing her explanation. On the pages filled with medical terms, numbers marked in red burned into my vision. These drugs are used to enhance academic performance. However, using them without a prescription is illegal. Administering them to a minor, in particular, is a serious criminal offense. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the window suddenly felt cold. The heavy atmosphere in the examination room constricted my chest. The blood test results show evidence that these drugs have been administered over a long period. Probably several months, or even more than half a year. So that's the cause of Megan's poor health. Yes. Headaches, insomnia, loss of appetite. These are all common side effects of these drugs. I pressed my fingertips against my eyes with trembling hands. Confusion, anger, and deep sadness washed over me like waves. My husband had been giving our daughter illegal drugs. The perfect daily life I thought we had was crumbling with a crash in an instant. "Mrs. Anderson." Dr. Morrison's voice seemed to come from far away. "I have a legal obligation to report this. I must report this to Child Protective Services and the police." The tissue box on the desk appeared blurry in my vision. Before I knew it, I was wiping tears from my cheeks. However, I felt I needed to tell you first. You're going to face some difficult decisions ahead. Outside the window, a small bird hopped from branch to branch. That casual scene felt like the last snapshot of our peaceful daily life. I must protect Megan, I whispered in a hoarse voice. Among the confusion, one thing was crystal clear. From this moment on, I had to stand up as a mother to protect my daughter. On the doctor's desk, the test results reflected the afternoon sun. That light seemed to illuminate truths that had been hidden until now. My hands were still shaking. But within that trembling, a different emotion was beginning to take root. It wasn't just fear. It was anger and determination. After leaving the hospital, I spent a long time in my car. My hands on the steering wheel were still trembling slightly. The facts Dr. Morrison had told me kept repeating in my head. Thomas was still at work, and Megan was at her after-school math club activities. The house should be empty. Opening the front door, I stepped into the silent house. The interior was as orderly as always. But today, that perfection felt strange. Thomas's study was at the end of the second floor, in the sunniest spot in the house. I hesitated for a moment in front of the heavy wooden door. Until now, entering here without my husband's permission had been an implicit taboo. The door wasn't locked. When I opened it, the afternoon sunlight cast long shadows on the floor. The large mahogany desk, tall bookshelf, leather chair, everything exuded a solemn atmosphere. Evidence. Muttering to myself as if for reassurance, I reached for the desk drawer. The top drawer contained perfectly organized stacks of documents. The middle drawer held stationery. And in the back of the bottom drawer, 3 small medicine bottles. The labels bore unfamiliar chemical formulas. When I picked them up, I could hear pills rattling inside. I turned on the computer. I tried Thomas's usual password. The numbers of Megan's birthday opened the screen. Browser history. Online purchase records. Invoices from overseas pharmaceutical companies. Cryptocurrency payment records. All the evidence was meticulously stored. As if his perfectionism extended even to the records of his crimes. Mom. The voice behind me made me nearly jump out of my skin. Turning around, there stood Megan in her school uniform, still looking pale. Math club ended early today. Yes. I wasn't feeling well. We moved to her room. The usual clean space. Textbooks were stacked on the desk, and academic achievement awards hung on the wall. Sitting together on the bed, I took my daughter's hand. Megan, has Dad been giving you pills? A moment of silence. Then, in a trembling voice, my daughter began to speak. Dad said they were vitamins to make me smarter. Memories raced through my mind like a film reel. The white pills Thomas casually gave our daughter at breakfast. His words, "These will help you concentrate better." It had all been planned. At first, I felt really good. I didn't get sleepy during class, and I could concentrate, but gradually, tears spilled from Megan's eyes. At that moment, mother and daughter held each other tightly. Her back trembled slightly. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I continued apologizing while stroking my daughter's hair. As a mother, I should have noticed sooner. That night, I laid out the evidence on the living room table. The medicine bottles, printouts of purchase histories, and Dr. Morrison's test results. I placed everything in front of Thomas when he returned home. "What is the meaning of this?" I asked in a quiet but firm voice. My husband's expression tensed. "Why were you in my study? Answer me. Why would you do this to Megan?" It was already dark outside. The table lamp illuminated my husband's panicked expression. "This was all for our daughter." Thomas raised his voice. At the sound, we heard a door closing upstairs. Megan must have retreated to her room. For our daughter. Making her dependent on drugs. It's a competitive world. If you don't get into a top school, you're a failure in life. This was an investment. For Megan's future. Are you insane? My voice shook. But not from fear. An unprecedented anger coursed through my entire body. Dr. Morrison says she's going to report this to the police. At those words, my husband's expression changed. Panic and anger mixed together. "You're not planning to report this, are you?" The sound of him slamming the table. Glasses rattled. But I didn't cower anymore. Nothing is more important than Megan's life. After declaring this with resolve, I stood up and headed upstairs to my daughter's room. "Megan, pack your things." We quickly packed necessities into a suitcase. Uniform, changes of clothes, underwear. My daughter's hands were shaking. I paused for a moment and took out the white teddy bear that Megan had treasured since childhood from the closet. "Let's take this too." Megan nodded slightly. Looking at my daughter's expression as she held back tears, my heart clenched. Passports, insurance cards, and bank books for both of us. The savings account I'd been secretly maintaining separate from my husband would now come in handy. Mother's heirloom ring too, for emergencies. School documents, medical records, and Dr. Morrison's test results along with the lawyer's contact information. Everything went into a clear file and into my bag. "Mom, is this really okay?" At Megan's anxious voice, I nodded firmly. "But Dad, he was thinking about us." "No," I gripped my daughter's shoulders firmly. "Even if it's out of love, there are things we shouldn't do. This is wrong." Downstairs, Thomas's panicked voice continued. I could occasionally hear him talking on the phone. "Isn't there some way to withdraw it? What about a settlement?" Legal terms drifted up fragmentally. The clock was approaching midnight. "We'll go out the back door. Hold your shoes." One last look around the room. A space filled with 15 years of memories. But staying here any longer would put my daughter's future at risk. The hospital test results tucked in my bag reinforced that resolve. "Let's go." We descended the stairs one step at a time, carefully to avoid creaking boards. Thomas's voice could still be heard from the living room. We quietly opened the back door, careful not to make any noise at the entrance. Crossing the garden by moonlight alone. The scent of flowers, lovingly tended by our dedicated gardener, wafted as if reluctant to bid us farewell. We'll start the car engine after turning the corner. Need to keep the tire noise down too. Mom. Megan in the passenger seat looked at me anxiously, her pale face illuminated by moonlight. "It's okay. I won't let anyone hurt you anymore." My phone vibrated in my handbag. A call from Thomas. But there was no going back now. I turned off the screen and entered my mother's address into the navigation system. The car carrying the two of us quietly drove through the dark residential area. The lights of our house in the rearview mirror grew smaller and smaller. This was the beginning of a new life. And my choice to protect my daughter. On the third morning after arriving at my mother's house, before sunrise, I was heading to the police station under the dim sky. Dr. Morrison's test results, the drugs found in my husband's study, online purchase records. All the evidence was in a brown envelope on the passenger seat. I have an appointment with Detective Johnson in the security division. When I announced this at reception, a female officer in uniform appeared. Her warm gaze, middle-aged like myself, helped ease my tension a bit. "Mrs. Anderson, this way please." The interview room was brighter than I had imagined. White walls, simple desk and chairs. The morning sun was beginning to stream through the windows. One by one, I took out the evidence from the envelope. The detective watched patiently as my hands trembled. That must have been a difficult decision. Detective Johnson said as she carefully examined each piece of evidence I submitted. The actual drugs, printouts of purchase histories, Dr. Morrison's test results, and my notes recording the interactions between Megan and Thomas. But it was the right choice. With this much evidence, an indictment is certain. I've already contacted Child Protective Services. That afternoon, a Child Protective Services representative arrived promptly. Social worker Mr. Clark spent over 2 hours talking with Megan in my mother's parlor. My daughter told everything, occasionally through tears. "Your daughter's testimony is extremely important," he told me with a serious expression. "Administering drugs to a minor. Moreover, by her own father. This will be treated as a major case. We considered temporary protective custody, but judged that the current environment is acceptable." The meeting with the lawyer was the next day. Sarah Wilson, the lawyer Dr. Morrison had recommended, was a renowned specialist in family law. Her office was in a Manhattan high-rise. "We'll need to address this from both civil and criminal perspectives." She took notes while fixing me with a sharp gaze from behind her gold-rimmed glasses. "First, a protection order. Then the custody issue. We'll need to restrict your husband's visitation rights. As for the criminal charges, I've already begun discussions with the prosecutor. They take drug-related crimes very seriously." After about a week, rumors began spreading through the community. Like ripples through Greenwich's quiet residential area. Once local papers reported it, interview requests flooded in, and national news programs began covering the case. The media portrayed this incident as the distortion of educational competition and the tragedy brought about by elite school obsession. Greenwich High School was also scrambling to respond. The principal held an emergency parents' meeting and invited experts to lecture about the dangers of drug use. And surprisingly, similar victim reports began pouring in. A hidden problem had suddenly surfaced. Investigations into drug use in educational settings began, extending to cram schools and tutoring centers. The trial began 3 months later. Connecticut Supreme Court. Opening the heavy wooden doors revealed a solemn atmosphere. The gallery was full. Not just local media, but national newspaper reporters watched intently as I took the witness stand. "As a mother, what made you decide to press charges?" To the prosecutor's question, I answered straight ahead, taking a deep breath to keep my voice from shaking. "We mothers must protect our children's future. Even if it means For a moment, words failed me. The courtroom fell dead silent. Even if it means going against their father. Megan's life, health, and above all, her smile. I'll do anything to protect those. Expert testimony followed. Dr. James Clark, a drug addiction specialist, explained in detail the dangers of Adderall and modafinil. Using slides, he testified about the effects on minors' brains, addiction risks, and long-term health consequences, backed by scientific data. These drugs can potentially cause irreversible damage to developing brains. Recent research has shown they particularly impact frontal lobe development. Education expert Dr. Martha Wilson also took the stand. In recent years, the intensification of academic competition has become a serious problem. However, this never justifies illegal drug use. Rather, we should use this case as a lesson to reconsider our approach to education itself. A heavy atmosphere filled the courtroom. Finally, Thomas's closing argument. Gone was his once dignified appearance as he stood up, looking exhausted. I was wrong. His voice was hoarse. Winning competitions, getting into prestigious schools. I thought that was everything. But that thinking destroyed my daughter's life, our family bonds, everything. His words trailed off. Self-justification had completely crumbled, leaving only deep regret. The day of the verdict. The courtroom was again packed with people. Local residents, educators, and many reporters. As the nation watched, the judge began speaking. The defendant, Thomas Anderson, is sentenced to 5 years in prison. A small murmur arose in the courtroom. This case is a tragedy caused by overheated educational competition. However, no reason can justify administering drugs to a minor. The defendant's actions greatly exceeded parental authority and endangered his own child's health and future, constituting a serious crime. The verdict served as a strong warning to society. It sent shockwaves through the entire education community, sparking discussions about educational reform nationwide. Megan and I held each other's hands tightly. The tears rolling down my daughter's cheeks weren't from fear or sadness, but relief at ending a long battle. Leaving the courthouse, we were met by a crowd of reporters. Camera flashes went off, questions flew. Microphones were thrust forward, and we paused. Then, one final statement. This is a new beginning. For a society where all children can learn safely. With that, we made our way through the crowd of reporters. A spring day, 1 year after the verdict. Cherry blossoms in full bloom are visible from our new apartment window. We moved to Stamford, a 30-minute train ride from Greenwich, and our lives have changed dramatically. We chose this city because it was convenient for Megan's schooling. Maintaining my daughter's daily routine was most important. Our 3-bedroom apartment is small compared to our former mansion. But it's plenty spacious for a mother and daughter. On weekends, we shop at the local farmers market and cook together. We were slowly regaining these simple daily pleasures. Mom, I'm heading out. Megan's voice calls from the entrance. Her figure carrying her school bag looks much stronger than before. Thanks to twice-weekly counseling and proper medical treatment, her recovery from drug dependence has been steady. Her natural smile has returned, and the dark circles under her eyes have disappeared. The battle against drug withdrawal symptoms wasn't easy. She faced insomnia, headaches, and sometimes severe anxiety attacks. But with support from medical specialists and counselors, Megan overcame each challenge. I also returned to work as an accountant after 10 years. I work flexible hours at an accounting firm run by a former colleague. I leave for work after seeing Megan off in the morning and can always return home by evening. Balancing work and family is challenging, but financial independence was necessary for our new life. The case made huge waves in America's education community. School boards everywhere introduced drug prevention programs. Schools now have dedicated counselors and regular systems for checking students' physical and mental health. Linda, please review this request from the Board of Education. I look over the documents placed on my desk. Sometimes, I share my experience in awareness activities for parents. Though I hesitated at first, I felt the need to share this experience to prevent the same mistakes from being repeated. The media continues to run feature articles regularly, warning about the problems caused by overheated educational competition. What is the essence of education? How do we protect children's futures? Various papers run special features, with ongoing expert discussions. Legal systems were also significantly revised. Penalties for administering drugs to minors were strengthened, and monitoring systems for drug use in schools and tutoring centers became more stringent. The definition of parental abuse also became more comprehensive. And occasionally, I hear about Thomas. 1 year into his sentence. His initial defiance has faded, and he's sincerely engaging in rehabilitation programs. He's begun participating in educational support activities for inmates, using his experience as a warning to others with similar mindsets. Megan and I have discussed many times whether to visit him. It might still be too soon. But I secretly hope that someday, the father-daughter relationship can be restored. Mrs. Anderson, it's time for your daughter's career counseling session. In the new high school's counseling room, we discuss Megan's future. No more forcing things. We should respect her wishes and let her proceed at her own pace. I want to become an art teacher. When I heard those words, tears welled up in my eyes. Released from the former pressure, Megan had found her true dream. I want to teach children the joy of creating. I want to make a place where everyone can shine in their own way. This dream might have been born from our experiences over these 2 years. It was probably her own answer, found beyond the suffering she'd endured. On high school graduation day, under the blooming cherry blossoms, Megan showed a radiant smile. Watching her proudly hold up her diploma in her black gown, I felt deeply moved. While her grades were excellent, that was now secondary. My daughter had found her own path and begun walking toward it. That, I realized, was true success. After taking commemorative photos, Megan asked in a small voice, "Mom, can I send a photo to Dad?" I quietly nodded at her question. We don't need to be a perfect family. What's important is caring for each other and being honest. According to the rehabilitation facility counselor, Thomas gazed at the photo for a long time when he received it. Then, with moist eyes, he began writing a letter. It was a long confessional letter about how he planned to live his life after release. Cherry blossom petals fall on mother and daughter's shoulders, as if announcing the start of a new season. This is our story. A record of the collapse and rebirth of a family that sought too much perfection. And proof that the courage to face truth creates a new future. Megan has now begun walking her own path. I too am walking a new life, both as a mother and as a woman. And somewhere, Thomas is probably walking his own path of atonement. We no longer live to meet someone else's expectations. We're just walking forward, one step at a time, being true to our hearts. Yes, this isn't an ending, but a new beginning.